I want to bring in former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani tonight. He's prosecuted numerous drug and human trafficking border cases while serving with the U.S. Attorney's Office in California. Neama, this, if you watch the video, the thing that strikes me, broad daylight. Why are cartels allowed to terrorize these areas? Mexico says it wants them gone. The U.S., I would think, could insist that they do something about it. Why are criminals still in charge there?
Well, it's a complicated question with no clear answer, but I could tell you that, when I was a former federal prosecutor, I put more than 1,000 people in prison, and most of them for drug and human trafficking. And even on my best day, I was maybe getting 5 to 10% of the drugs that were coming into the United States. Just the demand is so high, and there's so much money to be made. And then on the Mexico side, it's really a culture of corruption amongst law enforcement, local and federal levels. I've seen it as a representative of the U.S. government. I've seen it as a tourist going to Mexico, where the cartels in certain states, they run the drug trade there, and it's just open and notorious, and law enforcement does little to stop them, and in fact, they protect them.
Can you spell that out a little bit further? Because a lot of people think police, they want them gone. I would think if I'm a parent raising a child there, I want them gone. Who benefits from these cartels existing and really dominating?
Well, the politicians do, and many of them are in cahoots with these cartel members. They're getting bribes, and this isn't something that I'm just making up. This is something that is documented at the highest levels of the Mexican government. The corruption is there, and really, frankly, the people who benefit from the cartels are actually the people of Mexico sometimes, because when there's a cartel that has control over a particular state or region, and in this case, we're talking about the Gulf cartel, there's actually less violence. Oftentimes when, whether it's Mexican or U.S. officials, they get the heads of a certain organization, then many other folks will come in, and it creates instability because it's such a lucrative trade that other drug trafficking organizations want to step in and actually take that business.
So I had never, ever thought that's like a devil scenario then, is what you're saying.
No. Oh, exactly. Sometimes you get the head of the snake and you just end up creating more violence and more problems.
I'm looking around the Latin American region. You have something like El Salvador. They have cut their homicides by almost 90% in the past few years. It was raging. It was scary. Now, I will say, they got ruthless with gangs. It has not been always pretty. It has not always been surgical, which people will tell you, but people are and do feel safer than before. What we know about them is that they have a friend in the president. He was going to back them up. He was the main one saying, this has to get done. Do Mexico's leaders really want to squash the cartels?
I don't think so. And, folks will sometimes say, I look like the president of El Salvador, but we're very different. Obviously, he's been criticized for some human rights violations, but he's made one of the most dangerous countries in the world actually safe by, really sort of short-circuiting many of the protections that the defendants have there. But really the question is it because of these prisons that he's created? And we've all seen the pictures on Twitter, and he said he's the world's coolest dictator, and there's a lot of folks that have criticized his heavy-handed tactics. Or is it because he cut a deal with MS-13 and some of the other gangs there? So I think it's a little bit too early to tell. The results are there, certainly. Crime is down significantly, but there are his opponents who are saying, look, here's someone who's really achieved these results only because he's entered into negotiations with these cartel members, not because of actually enforcing the country's laws.
Wow. Okay, that is really helpful context, because you look at the raw numbers, but then actually how you achieve it, it gets a little uglier and messier. America, we know we have our issues, right? We have very violent cities right now. We send guns to Mexico. We don't get their guns from them, they get them from us. We buy drugs from Mexico, and they say, well, you're the ones buying it. It's going to keep coming. It's going to keep being dangerous. If Mexico were to say, okay, enough is enough, we're getting serious about this, would the U.S. and our authorities, would we help them get rid of the cartels?
I think potentially we would. And when you're analyzing the Mexican drug cartels, you have to sort of think, well, how did they rise to power? And really, they rose because of the increase in purely synthetic drugs. Started with methamphetamine, and now you're dealing with synthetic designer drugs like 2C and 2CB. Whereas historically, the Mexicans, they were just middlemen. I mean, most of the drug cartels, they're men. I'm not trying to be sexist, but they were just really drug runners running drugs, cocaine from Colombia or heroin from Afghanistan. But now they've completely taken control of the manufacturing and distribution of certain drugs, which is why they've become so powerful. If Mexico is really intent on actually stopping this trade, they're going to need military force, and we know the corruption has extended to the Mexican military. That's why oftentimes when the U.S. needs help, they'll rely on the Mexican Navy, because they're some of the few folks who haven't been corrupted by the cartels. But really, if Mexico is truly intent on stopping this drug trade, they're going to need military force and U.S. military force to make this happen, because I do not think that Mexican law enforcement and federales are equipped to handle this job.
And really briefly then, if I'm hearing you right, Neama, I mean, it's been a wake-up call this week, but this lady who's 60 years old going to buy her husband's $400 medicine for $30 because she needs it, it sounds like they still have to have concerns because this is not going away.
Oh, absolutely. We have a public health crisis here in the United States, but also my heart goes out to the thousands of Mexican natives and migrants who are killed every year because of the cartel.
Very good point. Former federal prosecutor Neama Rahmani, thank you.